Hello, and thank you for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle. A University of Texas coach fired from his job amid accusations of a scheme where wealthy parents paid big money to get their children into top colleges. And like clockwork, Texas lawmakers once again take up bills to let the state opt out of daylight saving time. But some high-profile support could make the outcome different this time. First, there are now two Texans in the crowded race for the Democratic nomination for president. Former El Paso Congressman Beto O'Rourke announced his 2020 bid Thursday through social media. He joins former San Antonio Mayor Julian Castro as a second candidate from Texas. Steffi Lee highlights their paths to the presidential race.
The challenges that we face right now, the interconnected crises in our economy, our democracy, and our climate have never been greater.
Beto O'Rourke's 2020 campaign is now underway. The El Paso Democrat narrowly lost his U.S. Senate race against Texas Republican Senator Ted Cruz last year.
Keokuk is the first stop in our campaign to be president.
His announcement dropped just hours before he started chatting with Iowans in coffee shops and restaurants.
With the many candidates entering the field on the Democratic side, how do we keep this campaign from becoming the zoo that was represented by the Republican Party in the last general election?
Great question. So many amazing candidates running for president right now. It's a great sign that in some important ways this democracy still works.
All sides are going to get heard in these debates. The person that emerges as the nominee is going to be stronger for it.
The many candidates include fellow Texan Democrat Julian Castro, who spoke at South by Southwest. Castro has secured endorsements from 30 elected and appointed Texas Democrats, including ones from border communities.
I want to make sure that no matter who you are, where you come from, what your background is, that you can also reach your dreams.
We've got to make sure that this very divided, highly polarized country is able to come together.
O'Rourke will spend this weekend campaigning throughout eastern Iowa. In his campaign announcement video, O'Rourke said he'll return back here to Texas for a kickoff rally in El Paso on March 30th. For State of Texas, I'm Steffi Lee.
Even before O'Rourke announced he was running, a Republican group started airing a TV attack ad against him. The right-leaning Club for Growth launched a 2-minute-long ad to air in Iowa. The ad paints O'Rourke as a privileged underachiever.
Progressives say Beto's bizarre campaign rollout drips with white male privilege. The kind of navel-gazing, self-involved behavior a woman or person of color could never get away with.
In an interesting approach for the Republican group, the ad praises former President Barack Obama, then draws a sharp contrast between him and O'Rourke. But it's not just Republicans O'Rourke has to worry about now. He faces a tough challenge to set himself apart in an already crowded field of Democrats, including a fellow Texan. O'Rourke will be battling Julian Castro for endorsements, campaign contributions, and voters in the Democratic primary. Phil Prazen takes a closer look.
The morning Beto O'Rourke announced he was running for president, the Texan already in the race, former San Antonio Mayor Julian Castro, released a list of 33 people that have endorsed him and are from Texas. They include 3 congressmen and more than a dozen state lawmakers. One of them is Round Rock Representative James Tallarico.
I used to teach middle school in the neighborhood that he grew up in San Antonio, while he was mayor, and so I saw his commitment to educational opportunity.
For Tallarico, it's a decision based on a relationship. He's spent more time with Castro and knows him better.
I think it's everything. I mean, the fact that I can personally attest to his leadership qualities and his commitment to the causes that I care about.
And now the two face off across the country. O'Rourke and Castro will sprint, meeting as many people as they can. But voters in this state told the University of Texas in a recent poll they still need to know more about Castro. From February 2019, O'Rourke leads Castro among Democrats 85 to 51. And 23% of Texans didn't know enough of Castro to make an opinion. And Castro's supporters say that he's more experienced than Beto O'Rourke and the other candidates as well, with his time as San Antonio mayor and his time as leader of the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Phil Prazen for State of Texas.
One other measure all the candidates are racing toward, 65,000 individual donations. That mark is the cutoff to get on the debate stage for the Democratic Party this year. It hopes to encourage a broad number of supporters and not a few wealthy donors. With two Texans now in the race for president, who has the clearest path to the nomination?
But as far as who's resonating with Democrats, I think the jury's still out.
Up next, we turn to our roundtable for perspective on the challenges and the campaign ahead. Like clockwork, Texas lawmakers once again take up bills to let the state opt out of daylight saving time.
I'm tired of changing the clocks twice a year.
What's different this time that could lead supporters to success? Two Texans are now in the race for president, but does either have a real path to the nomination? For perspective, we turn to our roundtable. Alana Rocha from the Texas Tribune, Carlos Sanchez for Texas Monthly, and John Moritz with the USA Today Network. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
Glad to be here.
So, two Texans in the race. It seems like Beto has all the buzz, but Castro also says he has a lot of support.
Right. You know, upon Beto getting into the race Thursday officially, Castro released a list of 30 endorsements, which interestingly, some of them come from the border, where, of course, Beto is a native son. So, you know, just trying to, I think, clamor at the, you know, trying to get the headlines where he can.
And the interesting component of that endorsement list was very subtle in that most, if not all, were Hispanic public elected officials. I think this time around there's going to be a lot more buzz about cultural appropriation as with regards to Beto. I've already seen it on a lot of Twitter feeds, and I think that with Ted Cruz, it wasn't so much an issue. With Julian Castro, it will be.
So with two Texans, you know, what's the difference and what's the similarity?
Well, with Beto, he's widely known now, having run against Cruz, raised a ton of money, got a lot of name ID around the country. With Castro, like Carlos said, the Democratic primary voter tends to reward the Hispanic surname. But I still think that they're going to have to, you know, campaign hard for Texas. Nothing's a given, and you know, we'll see how the voters respond. But it should be a pretty good race in Texas.
The interesting component is that this is now a national race. It's not simply a Texas race, and the stakes have gone up tremendously. The real question is who is more disciplined and whether that discipline really manifests itself in voter support and turnout. Beto has tremendously been undisciplined during the Senate race, but has run a very well-organized social media campaign. I think Julian is the contrast. He's got a very disciplined campaign, but his early foray into social media has not been as effective as Beto.
Well, and only one of them's really tested, right? I mean, Castro's run in San Antonio and then been appointed to a cabinet position. He hasn't really been tested on a big stage like Beto did, and came darn close to beating a popular Republican incumbent.
You know, voters tend to reward charisma quite a bit, and the ability to connect, as they say, with ordinary voters, and that should accrue to Beto's favor, I would imagine.
You know, earlier we showed a bit of the Club for Growth ad attacking Beto that ran in Iowa even before he officially joined the race. How significant is that?
Well, it shows that he has got their attention on the one hand. On the other hand is, boy, would we love to run against Beto. Let's prop him up a little bit, and he will be easier to knock down. I kind of think it's the former, though, because you could tell President Trump was ready with some quips as soon as he had the opportunity to come out right after Beto made his announcement.
And there's an interesting combination, I think, between going onto the national stage to run a national campaign and Beto fatigue. I think that there was a lot of intense interest when he was running for Senate, and it might have peaked right after he lost the election, particularly as he began his personal foray online about what he would do next. And so there's this element, I think, of more freedom to attack and perhaps lampoon Beto at the same time that the stakes have grown tremendously.
Does the GOP really see him as a threat?
I mean, he called the Club for Growth ad, I think, the highest form of flattery. And again, he wasn't even an officially declared candidate when that came out. So I think that they're trying to, you know, again, Republicans are calling him Robert Francis and trying to strip down the Beto. I saw something posted on Twitter this week where it was Beto, maybe 4 years old, in a Beto sweater. So he's been called that nickname for a long time. It's not a political ploy. But yeah, I think there's a lot to attack there. He's fluent in Spanish. He does interviews in Spanish. He appeals to the young people by being a former punk band member and things like that. So, you know, they saw what he did here in Texas and the fact how much he helped down ballot Democrats. I think there's, you know, he's seen as a threat.
Yeah, on election night, Ted Cruz's campaign manager came over and chatted up the press. And it was really before it was clear that Beto would run nationally. He says, we got to take this guy very, very seriously. The Democrats don't have anybody who's got the raw talent that this man has right now.
When you have two, you know, big figures like that are going to be in this Democratic race, which one's really resonating with Democrats right now?
That's an interesting question, because I can tell you easily which one's resonating with the media. But as far as who's resonating with Democrats, I think the jury's still out on that. What would you think?
Between Castro and Beto?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I mean, it's interesting because this is now the third presidential campaign that I will have been on the road for, and there's always been two Texans. You know, in 2012, it was Perry and Paul. Then it was Cruz and Perry for a brief time. And now with these two, being that they're so close in age and, you know, maybe thin resumes when it comes to their records, I think there is more comparison, whereas before, I don't think the Texans and I don't think these Texans necessarily will attack each other, but I think there's more rivalry, if you will, just because of their age and their experience levels.
Who can better stand up to a national field? I mean, there's so many people that are in the Democratic race right now. We're just talking about Texas right now, but does Beto fare better in that kind of race?
Well, I think he'll fare better initially because he has the ability to raise the money more quickly. Whether that balances out is yet to be seen. I remember there's another Texas force in the race, and that is Ann Richards' granddaughter, who's done an outstanding job with Kamala Harris's campaign from California.
And Kamala Harris will be in Houston this month, too, so the other Democrats are not necessarily ceding the field of Texas to the two Texans.
All right. Well, thank you guys for being with us. We'll catch up with you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Josh.
UT Austin gets caught up in the nationwide college admissions scam.
To make sure that nothing like this either is happening or can happen.
The warning from the governor now going to all schools in Texas. College students push Texas lawmakers to strengthen policies against sexual assault on campus.
To make sure he never did this to anybody. To make sure that he never hurt anybody like he hurt me.
How their stories are shaping the debate to change the culture on college campuses.
An investigation into what could be the largest college admissions scam in U.S. history has a link to the University of Texas. Here's how investigators say it worked. Federal prosecutors say 33 parents paid to get their children into the top universities, with the money going through the Key Worldwide Foundation led by William Singer. Investigators say some admissions test proctors were bribed to improve test scores. 9 college coaches accused of unfairly listing the children as athlete recruits also face charges. One of them was Longhorn tennis coach Michael Center. He's accused of accepting a nearly $100,000 bribe to list a student as a recruit for the team for easier admission. The university fired Center after his arrest. Governor Greg Abbott made it clear that UT and other universities in Texas need to make sure the admissions process is fair.
It's important for every university to go back and reevaluate, to study, and to investigate their admissions processes to make sure that nothing like this either is happening or can happen. I expect all universities to look into this and to make sure they have procedures and policies in place so that this type of action will never be able to happen again.
Students from across the country are suing the universities that are named in the college admissions cheating scheme. The students were rejected by some of those schools, including UT Austin, and say they did not get what they paid for when they applied for college, assuming the system was free of fraud. Alyssa Gord breaks down how this lawsuit could impact students who have applied to UT.
With a growing number of applicants, getting into UT Austin is becoming harder and harder. Now only those who graduate in the top 6% of their high school class are admitted.
Oh, it's extremely competitive. 75% of the admitted freshman class are auto admits. The university is only looking at accepting 25% of their class in a holistic review.
Vicki Ross knows she went to UT decades ago. Now she counsels students on how to do the same.
In the last 15 years, I feel that UT has really stepped up their game in doing that holistic review. I see a lot of students that are not auto admits get accepted to the University of Texas.
In 2015, the entire UT system approved a new admissions policy for all their schools, including UT, designed to ensure fairness and that no unqualified applicants be admitted. But the lawsuit claims this didn't happen at UT Austin. It says any student who applied to one of these universities and was rejected, including UT, should be eligible for monetary compensation.
The thing you have to think about is you can be a perfect student, 4.0, take all of the advanced AP classes that there are, have perfect scores, and still not get into many of these schools.
Alyssa Gord for the state of Texas.
We reached out to UT Austin about this lawsuit. Representatives say they were outraged that parents, outside actors, and university employees may have committed fraud surrounding admissions. They also say the actions alleged by federal prosecutors against one UT employee do not reflect the university's admission process. This is not the first time we've seen accusations of money and power influencing UT admissions. Alyssa mentioned changes to the admissions policy in 2015. That came after the independent Kroll report looked into how students with grades and test scores well below the median were getting admitted to the university. The report focused on 73 students whose applications were put on hold before being admitted because of requests from college deans or the UT president's office. The Kroll report found that most of those holds came after Texas lawmakers, members of the Board of Regents, as well as donors and alumni reached out to UT officials. The report called for changes in the hold process to prevent well-connected students from getting an unfair advantage. That included limits on when school presidents in the UT system could step in and get a student admitted. The report came while UT Regent Wallace Hall was leading an effort to uncover details about students getting preferential treatment. Hall was accused of overstepping his bounds, and Chancellor Bill McRaven denied his request to access confidential student records. Hall appealed to the Texas Supreme Court, but in early 2017, the court ruled against him. His term as a regent ended a short time later. College students are pushing Texas lawmakers to pass bills they say would strengthen policies in cases of sexual assaults. Some of them shared their own accounts of surviving sexual assault with lawmakers.
I want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to be the best version of themselves and live their best possible lives. That belief in people and in growth is why I strongly support this bill. My assailant was allowed to transfer and escape being found responsible for his actions. He was denied his opportunity for growth. He was not given a chance to reflect and become better, to learn and to make sure he never did this to anybody, to make sure that he never hurt anybody like he hurt me.
Baylor student Sierra Smith survived a sexual assault by a male classmate in 2016. She testified in support of a bill to require schools to add a disciplinary note on a student's transcript if they were suspended or expelled. That would let colleges know of a student's record during a transfer process. The bill was one of 3 considered by the House Committee on Higher Education. Another measure would require public and private universities to adopt clear protocols and reporting and responding to sexual assault cases. A third bill would have the state's Higher Education Coordinating Board produce a report about how colleges and universities respond to reports of sexual assault.
Could changing your clocks to spring forward and fall back soon be a thing of the past? The push to get rid of daylight saving time, and why this time the result might be different than what we've seen before.
It's like clockwork. About this time in the legislative session, we see a bill come forward to have Texas opt out of daylight saving time. No surprise that state lawmakers debated a bill last week to end the time change in the Lone Star State, but as Wes Rappaport shows us, this time they're getting powerful support.
I'm tired of changing the clocks twice a year.
San Antonio Republican Lyle Larson is the latest lawmaker to push for the state to stop observing daylight saving time. He says the system is outdated.
We need to figure this out as a modern society about one time or the other.
The plan to exempt the state from this is not a new one, but it's picking up momentum across the country, with other states considering the change too. Even President Donald Trump tweeted out his support for springing forward and staying there.
Here to support passage of House Bill 49 to end daylight savings time.
This woman drove more than 3 hours to tell lawmakers she's worried about students who are trying to get to school in darker conditions after springing forward.
It's hazardous to bus students and those walking to school.
This rural farmer told lawmakers ending daylight saving time would affect his ability to provide for his family.
I'm okay with not changing the clock. It's where we land that's going to have the negative impact.
A Houston Republican senator is spearheading an effort to let voters decide in November whether to stay fallen back or sprung forward. Larson is working on similar legislation. In the meantime, he's just ready to stop losing sleep over this.
It is idiotic that we continue to follow this pattern.
I'm Wes Rappaport for State of Texas.
Agriculture producers in West Texas tell us there are farmers on both sides of this. Some prefer lighter mornings and some prefer lighter evenings. Bills like this have failed before, but there is precedent for states to opt out of daylight saving time. A federal law lets states choose to stay on standard time year-round. That's what happened in Arizona and Hawaii. But if Texas wants to stay on daylight saving time, it would need congressional approval. Congress has considered bills to allow that option, but those bills have never come up for a vote. In Texas, lawmakers have proposed bills before, but they've never moved forward. Larson's bill was left pending in the Texas House State Affairs Committee. Thank you again for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle. We'll be back next week to bring you an in-depth look at Texas politics.